Welcome back. In the latest that we are breaking to you, on the Sri Lanka crisis, information just coming in that a government member of parliament at a parliamentarian's house has been destroyed. Angry protesters demolished the MP's house. The house of MP Sanath Nishant, who led a mob to attack the Galle-faced protesters, and the house is completely destroyed. Amid the worsening crisis in Sri Lanka, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa has stepped down. This comes just moments after a nationwide curfew was announced in the island nation. Earlier today, clashes broke out between rival political camps in capital Colombo. 2 have been killed while nearly 140 people injured in this violence. A ruling party MP has also been killed in the clashes. Meanwhile, Vistara airline has suspended all flights to Sri Lanka for about a month now. The island nation has been facing acute shortages of food, fuel, medicines and electricity supply. This is Lanka's worst economic crisis since gaining independence from Britain in 1948. Let me go across to defense and security analyst Maruf Raza joining us on the phone line. Maruf, where do you see this headed? We now have this development of the Prime Minister stepping down. What is the future of this island nation given the kind of crisis that we have seen both politically and economically at this point?
Well, for over a month now, it's been quite clear that the anger of the mobs is really largely against the Rajapaksa family. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, who has stepped down, was earlier president. Sri Lanka, as we know, has a presidential form of government. That means the president is the most powerful member of the ruling dispensation. And there has been in the past a history of families controlling the entire sort of political game, as it were. There was the earlier president, Chandrika Kumaratunga. She was the daughter of the Bandarnaik family, and her old and aged mother was made prime minister there just to somehow show a total control over the system. So Sri Lanka's democracy raises many questions about really what is the model of democracy that South Asians are really fit for. Secondly, the Rajapaksa family has been blamed, and rightly so, for selling Sri Lanka to the Chinese. 2 major issues have continued to haunt them. One is the deal that the Chinese struck with the Sri Lankan government at the time of Mahinda Rajapaksa when he was president, which is of the Hambantota port. And Sri Lanka was unable to pay back the high rates of interest the Chinese demand, and therefore the port has gone under control of the Chinese. Now the Chinese have been given special rights to parts of Colombo to develop that. This was earlier something that India and Japan had bid for. There was an arrangement in place, but that was set aside to give the Chinese favorable spots. The third thing is that Sri Lanka continues to reel under the post-pandemic situation because the country's large economic revenue earner was tourism. And tourism, as we all know, suffered during the pandemic. But it was largely the mishandling of the situation in Sri Lanka because the presidential orders was for going in for certain forms of organic farming, which has had a further impact on Sri Lanka's inability to grow the necessary amount of grain that the people need. And in the absence of revenue coming in from tourism, Sri Lanka was not able to pay for the fuel that they normally import for the generators that provide electricity to the country. And so overall, it's been a messy situation. India has tried to help out. India has gone in for currency swap. It has not had what somebody might say as a mercantilist approach that the Chinese have to all financial deals that they lure countries into signing, whether it's Sri Lanka today or it was Myanmar yesterday, or Pakistan for decades now. So therefore, Sri Lanka needs to revisit its entire set of economic arrangements that it has with the Chinese. it also needs to revisit its political dispensation, which has enormous clout even now. The Rajapaksa family, from what I understand, was not just the president, who is the younger brother of the outgoing prime minister,
Yes.
but also had the finance and defense ministers' portfolios. So virtually all the key issues were being controlled by one family. And the anger of the
Right.
mobs is largely
Absolutely. We
against
see
the
that on our
Rajapaksa
screens
family.
even as you speak, Maruf. The anger of the people spilling onto the streets, violent clashes witnessed today, and one member of parliament killed in those clashes as well. Curfew imposed now in whole of Sri Lanka. Thank you, Maruf, for giving us perspective on this. Well, ahead of tomorrow's hearing in Supreme Court on the validity of the contentious sedition law, the centre has informed the top court that it has now decided to re-examine and reconsider the provisions of the law. It has also requested the apex court not to take up the sedition law validity case until the union government is done re-examining it. Earlier, the government had maintained that sedition law should not be struck down. Instead, its misuse can be curbed.
Undoubtedly, the sedition law should be repealed. However, the affidavit which the government has filed in the Supreme Court seems to be a rather curious submission, because what they have essentially said is that at an appropriate point in time, in an appropriate forum, they would consider this question. It almost seems as if they are trying to preempt the Supreme Court's adjudication of this matter.
So Manish Tiwari there saying this is indeed a curious submission and rather intriguing that the centre should at this stage now decide to relook at the sedition law. Now what would come of it, we still don't know. The centre has filed a second affidavit in top court and also urged the top court not to consider the issue of validity at this stage, rather allow the centre some more time to re-examine the provisions of the sedition law. In other developments today, bulldozers are back in the national capital and this time in Shaheen Bagh. The site of protests against the Citizenship Amendment Act is back in the news. The area saw high drama today as the civic body workers carried out an anti-encroachment drive. The move triggered protests from Shaheen Bagh residents. Political leaders like Aam Aadmi Party's Amanatullah Khan also landed up in the location. The drive at Shaheen Bagh comes days after a similar bulldozer demolition drive was conducted in riot-hit Jahangirpuri. The CPM filed a petition over today's demolition in the top court. The court refused to intervene, saying, and I quote, "The plea is filed by a political party. The court is not a platform for all this," unquote. My colleague Alok joining us with more. So, Alok, this is playing out both in the streets of Delhi and in the court. First of all, take us through the developments of the day. What ensued there in Shaheen Bagh? What kind of political presence was there amidst the crowds?
Well, Afrida, it was a lot of drama that was unfolded at the same stretch where the anti-CA law protest had happened. And in fact, that area has also become, that main stretch has also become very prominent as far as this Shaheen Bagh is concerned. And at that stretch only this anti-encroachment drive was supposed to be conducted. But interestingly, that Municipal Corporation of Delhi, South MCD, the officials, the bulldozer, as well as the local police, when they reached over there, they did not find a single encroachment over there, because the reason is the people, those who had done that encroachment, they had already removed, because they got the information about that that the encroachment is that anti-encroachment is going to happen, the drive is going to be conducted, so that is why they had already removed. But we don't know exactly what MCD wanted to show at that point in time, because if you see that MCD had already declared that what are the stretches where they are going to conduct these kinds of drive. So definitely if the people got to know that this drive is going to be conducted in this particular location at this particular time, definitely if those who are doing encroachments, they will remove their stuffs. That is all had happened. So what kind of drama that was? And in fact, definitely the political parties also came in and they started creating whole ruckus, and they're trying to take the mileage out of it. First, the BJP workers came over there. They raised slogans in the favor of demolition. Then the Congress workers, those who are leaders, the local leaders also came over there. They got, in fact, detained as well when they tried to stop the bulldozer. And here's Aam Aadmi Party MLA Amanatullah Khan. He also came over there and he tried to stop the bulldozer, because the bulldozer was just moving ahead and just they were doing the scanning work wherever there is any shop or any installations which are against the or it's an illegal property. So this is all had happened, but later after that, when they did not find anything, a lot of kiosk happened. People also gathered over there, especially the residents of Shaheen Bagh, and they also objected to it. But the police force, in fact, tried to just control the situation so that no law and order situation could take place. Earlier, we saw that the police denied to give the adequate number of force, but this time it was allowed. But definitely, whole drama had happened at the streets of the Shaheen Bagh. But now, what the MCD says that definitely the people have removed their encroachments. But if they again come, then definitely the bulldozer will again be used at that particular stretch. Back to you.
The Supreme Court, in its wisdom, has said it is not going to intervene since the affected parties have not approached the court. Thanks for joining us, Alok. There were two petitions that were taken up by the top court. One was related to the demolition at Shaheen Bagh and the other related to the demolition at Jahangirpuri. In the latter case, the court maintained status quo, which means that no bulldozer drive can be conducted in Jahangirpuri until the next date of hearing. Residents in Chennai's Arepuram protested against a demolition drive there as well of around 260 houses by the Tamil Nadu government. Uprooted from their homes, residents complained of dealing with lack of food and water. While the residents claim that they have been living in the area for the last 60 years, the government officials say that they are following a Supreme Court order which has called for this drive. Mirror Now's Dharini brings us this report.
எங்களுக்கு என்ன தீர்வுன்னு கவர்மெண்ட் தான் சொல்லணும். என்ன பண்ணுவாங்களோ தெரியல. எங்க இப்படியே விட்டுருவாங்க போல இருக்கு. நாங்க ரோட்ல நிக்கிறோம் இன்னைக்கு. அனாதை மாதிரி உட்கார்ந்துட்டு இருக்கோம். அப்படியே தான் உட்கார்ந்துட்டு இருக்கோம். கஷ்டமா இருக்கு. ஏதோ இடிக்காத வீட்டுல போயிட்டு வரோம். தண்ணி இல்லாத ரொம்ப கஷ்டமா இருக்கு. இடிச்சவங்க இந்த ரோட்ல உட்கார்ந்துட்டு இருக்கோம். எங்க நிலைமை இந்த மாதிரி இருக்கு.
இதுவும் கிடையாது. ஏன் ஓட்டு போட்டு தானே நாங்க வர வச்சோம். அவங்க எல்லாம் நல்லா இருக்குன்னு நாங்க வர வச்சோம். எங்களையே இப்படி பண்ணா நாங்க என்ன பண்ண முடியும்? அன்னைக்கு வந்து எல்லாரும் கையெழுத்து கூப்பிடுறாங்களா, உங்களுக்கு பட்டாக்கி இன்னைக்கு எங்க நடு ரோட்ல நிக்க வச்சுட்டாங்க. நாங்க அடுப்ப தச்சு சோறாக்கி வைத்துருவோம். நாங்க ரோட்ல
ரொம்ப கஷ்டம் தானே. எங்களை போக சொன்னா நாங்க இங்க இருந்து போக மாட்டாங்க. இங்க தான் இருக்கணும். எங்களுக்கு எங்கன்னா சுத்து வட்டத்துல வீடு தரணும். அப்பதான் நாங்க இங்க இருந்து செம்மஞ்சேரி போனா செம்மஞ்சேரில இருந்து ஸ்கூல் காலை வர முடியுமா? வர முடியாது இல்ல. இங்க எதுவுமே வசதி இல்லை. இப்ப வீடு இடிச்சோன்னு எதுவுமே இல்லம்மா. பாத்ரூம் இல்ல, சாப்பிடறதுக்கு இல்ல, எல்லாமே மாட்டிச்சு மண்ணுக்குள்ள.
Let me go across to our correspondent Dharini joining us live. Dharini, obviously we just heard those voices of angry residents. Tell us more about this demolition drive. What was the reason and what prompted this drive, and what do the authorities have to say?
When we talked to officials from the Water Resource Department and Tamil Nadu Slum Clearance Board, they are telling that they are following a Supreme Court order that was put down in February 2022, telling that 259 houses located in Govindaswamy Nagar in Chennai's Arepuram should be demolished. So that order was put down after a petition from a businessman who allegedly owns a huge piece of land that's adjacent to Govindaswamy Nagar. So right now half of the demolition is almost over. And today even hundreds of residents, they were protesting in the roads. They were holding black flags and placards against the government, and they were telling that they'll not allow further demolition. And even yesterday, a resident named Kannaya, who is over 60 years of age, he set a fire to himself in protest against the demolition drive. And despite giving quality treatment at the Chennai government hospital, he died today morning. And this issue was brought to this issue was talked about in the Tamil Nadu Assembly today. The opposition ADMK, they brought a calling attention motion regarding this issue. And while replying to that motion, Tamil Nadu Chief Minister M.K. Stalin told that rupees 10 lakh compensation would be provided for Kanya's family, and that in the further displacements that are being carried out in the city, SOPs would be followed properly, because as far as this Aripuram displacement is concerned, activists are telling that SOPs were not followed properly. In fact, the residents are claiming that they were not informed about the demolition prior, and that they were not ready for the demolition in the first place, because the houses, they were demolished with things and materials of the residents inside itself. They were not even having the time to take them out and prepare themselves for the demolition drive. So right now, people whose houses have already been demolished, they are staying in the roads. They are complaining that they're not having proper food, and they're not even having washrooms for emergency use. In fact, women and children, they are the most affected because of this demolition drive.
Yes.
We could see lots of women staying in the roads, telling that they were sleeping in the open, and that they were not having washrooms to use for emergency purpose. So right now, the Tamil Nadu government has told that these people, the people of the Aripuram, they'll be allotted houses in Mandavalli and Mylapore, which are located very near to the this particular locality that we're talking about. So right now, this issue it's still going on, and no compromise has been arrived at it.
Right, and no alternative arrangements made for the people who are crying for help. Tharini getting us all the details from Chennai. Thanks very much. News that we are breaking to you. LIC IPO subscribed 2.95 times. The government briefs on LIC IPO.
Which contained several things, and different risk factors were duly also provided to the investors. And let us hope that everything goes well on the listing day.
110. Just to supplement, as Secretary Deepam has mentioned, I think there is, and this was mentioned by me in the earlier press conference before the IPO, also that the pricing that we have done is keeping in view the core intrinsic value, and not, on the basis of the day-to-day fluctuations and the future potential of growth. So that value is already embedded in the company. I would say we should not be, and that is true, for any investor, not to look at it, on a day-to-day basis, on, how the pricing is going to be on the day of the IPO. Let's look at it as a long-term or even...
Moving on, a petition has been filed in the Allahabad High Court over the opening of 22 rooms of the Taj Mahal. The plea seeks directions to the Archaeological Survey of India to open the rooms to quote-unquote see the truth. The petition, filed by Dr. Rajneesh Singh, media in charge of BJP's Ayodhya unit, has sought a fact-finding inquiry into the history of the Taj Mahal. According to the petition, Hindu groups have been claiming that Taj Mahal is an old Shiva temple. Thus, an inquiry must be conducted and the controversy should be put to rest.
चाहते हैं अदालत के थ्रू जो 20 कमरे हैं वो खोले जाए और जनता के सामने जो सच्चाई है वो आनी चाहिए।
महल के भीतर के 22 कमरे 1934 ईस्वी में खुले थे। उस समय का एक फोटो उपलब्ध होता है जिससे कि ये पता लगता है कि 34 में वो कमरा खोला गया था। उसके बाद ये कमरे खोले अवश्य गए होंगे, लेकिन एएसआई का कोई भी अधिकारी इस तथ्य को स्वीकार करने के लिए तैयार नहीं।
ये तस्वीर है
1934 की।
ये वही नीचे के कमरे हैं जिनका जिक्र होता है 22 कमरे।
हाँ, ये कमरों की तरफ जाने का रास्ता है जिसको कि दरवाजा ईंटों से, लाखोरी ईंटों से बंद किया गया है।
Well, with that, let's take a short break. Coming up on the other side, despite facing severe criticism for disallowing a child with special needs to board a flight in Ranchi, IndiGo Airlines has stood by its decision. recorded its losses and touched an all-time low of 77.42 against the US dollar in early trade today. The rupee was weighed down by the strength of the American currency. At the interbank forex, the rupee opened at 77.17 against the American dollar, then lost ground to quote at 77.42, registering a fall of 52 paise from the last close. On Friday, the rupee had slumped 55 paise to close at 76.9 against the US dollar. Now, despite facing severe criticism for disallowing a child with special needs to board a flight in Ranchi, IndiGo Airlines has stood by its decision. In a fresh statement, the airline has said that they took the best possible decision under those circumstances and as a goodwill gesture has now decided to offer the child an electric wheelchair. While clarifying the incident, IndiGo said that throughout the check-in and boarding process, their intent was only to fly the family in that aircraft. However, at the boarding area, the teenager was visibly panicking. Meanwhile, NCPCR has now asked Jharkhand police to register an FIR against IndiGo. On the 7th of May, a 13-year-old child was denied boarding to the aircraft in the Ranchi airport, where the family was taking a flight to Hyderabad.
तुम्हारे को समझ नहीं है इसकी संगीत, तुम्हारे को इसकी समझ नहीं है, जिस समझ के बाहर है तुम्हारे बाहर है, इसीलिए I will not lower my voice. This is unfair. This is totally unfair what you are doing. It is unfair. You do not understand.
Just because of your argument, we cannot accept.
Because you do not understand.
I understood. That is
not my argument. Look at the laws. Which law are you stopping him on? Which law?
In this condition, he was panicked a lot.
I was there. I have been hearing him. You don't even understand the English. Yeah, who is your senior?
Senior was there only.
I am also here in the airport. Yeah, we are seeing also for the last 2 hours. You are just standing on your ego, okay?